Mhm. Good morning, everyone. Good evening and good afternoon. Welcome back to today's class. As informed earlier, today we will be reading our statements for the FEMI political team, who will be joining us in about an hour to give us their inputs on the regional statements, and who will also be helping us on formulating our common global school statement. But before we begin, I would like to invite Regina to kindly give us the invocation for today. Regina, over to you.
Thank you, Joy. Good morning, sisters. Good evening or good afternoon for everyone. I hope my connection is good so you can hear me. Okay.
Yes,
So before we start, let's as thanks Mother Earth for all the blessing we have received. Thanking the forest for providing resources for us. Thanking the land for growing us food. Thank you for the gift of life. Thank you for the gift of water. And please accept our apology for all harm done through wrong actions. May what is outgrown become compost for wisdom's seed to flourish and grow. Let's thanking and ask for blessing from our ancestor. Thank you for abundance knowledge they have shared. And may all of us stay healthy and happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Thank you for opening that up for us for today, and also closing the who are towards the last hours of the evening. So today we will be having the CB political team in about 1 hour, but before your academic advisors will be joining you in these groups, and they will be helping you on any kind of doubts or clarifications that you may require with regards to your advocacy plans. Then we will come back to the main group at about 8:50 p.m. Guatemala time, and we will be reading our statements. So one member from each region will be presenting the statement to the FEMI political team in about 3 to 5 minutes each. So we will have the Latin America group go first. Second, we will have Africa and North America present. And then finally, we will have the Asia and Pacific team presenting the statements. After each team presents the statements, the FEMI political team will open the floor for a group discussion. So in this group discussion, I request you to please have your questions ready for the FEMI political team. Any kind of doubts, clarifications that you may need with regards to reading your statements, or wanting to add more inputs in your statements, or even registering for your individual organizations in the future for reading these statements. So please have your questions ready for that. Then the FEMI political team, after opening the floor to all the participants, they will have a presentation. They'll be sharing their findings on the regional statements, because we have already shared it with them, and they've already read your statements. So they'll be sharing any kind of missing important information that you would need to include in your statements, and any kind of other recommendations for overall global school statement. So that is what the agenda will look like for today. So we can break into groups now, and but before that, if anyone have any questions, please go ahead and unmute. Okay. So we will then break into groups, and we will come back in about 35 to 40 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi. Yes.
Okay. Um, I thought I saw Herma. I think maybe she dropped off.
Sorry.
So, no, I'm saying I thought I saw Herma in the main group. I think she dropped off.
Oh, yes.
So, have you, do you have access to the statement on the Google Doc? Hello?
Yes.
Have you seen
Yes, I've seen it.
the edited version?
Mm.
Oh, give me a moment. Mm. Okay, so since there's the two of you now,
Mm.
uh, which one of which one of the two of you will volunteer to read the statement when we get back?
I will read it.
Okay.
Mm.
Uh, and then we'll also need someone to be joining the global committee, the global committee that will, hmm, the global committee that will draft now the global statement, take all the three regional statements
Mm.
and draft now the global one. So again, which one of you will want to join the group, the drafting group, I mean?
I can join.
You can join. Okay. Right. So can I give you guys a few minutes to read
Mm.
through the statement, like 2 or 3 minutes, just read through the statement as is,
Mm.
and then we can talk about it. Um, you can let me know what you think about the statement, what you think we can add, what you think we can remove. Based on what you're looking at. Is that okay?
Yes.
Sisters, before it slips my mind, I would also just like to inform you that after this class today, you will be required to also nominate someone who will be part of the drafting committee for the global school. So please think of who you would like to nominate to the drafting committee as well. So you'll be working with 4 other sisters from Asia, Latin America, and North America. 3 other sisters. There'll be 4 of you in the drafting committee who will work on the global school statement. So you'll be taking inputs from your regional statements and taking it to the global school statement and making sure that there's a representation of your region as well in the global statement. So please decide or who you would like to nominate.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So yeah, are we going to discuss about the advocacy plan now?
Hi, Pema. Pema, so what
Hello.
we decided was we'll take about 20 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes to individually
Yes.
work on your advocacy plan, and then we'll come back to this group in about for 10 minutes for a wrap up, and then we will join the main group for the preemie political statement reading.
Okay.
So you can take 20 to 25 minutes to work on your plan, or if you have any questions immediately, I'm here. You can let
Okay,
me know.
sure. So yeah, I also, sorry, wait a minute. So yeah, Joy, I just wanted to ask a few things. I had because I told you that I'll be changing my advocacy plan. I had started working on it, and I'm currently planning of like translating the general recommendation 39 in Nepali language, and also compiling, because I will be working with an organization. So I'm also planning to like compile a document along with the translation about in where in other general recommendation that Indigenous women and Indigenous women with disabilities have been mentioned. So I'm trying to produce that one document and then mainstream that document to the youth at central level and at least one or two provinces, because the same thing is going to the same thing my organization itself is going to do that in the provinces. Like it will be doing more focusing on the overall Indigenous women with disabilities, and for me I'll be focusing more on Indigenous young people. So that's what I'm trying to do through my advocacy plan. But where I'm currently stuck is I'm currently editing on the previous advocacy plan. So I have the title, I have background, I have objectives, and also define some actions and activities. But in the last sessions, we had a lot of parts about SWOT analysis and the uh, I don't know, there were many parts regarding approaches and a lot of other things. So I'm just confused on how to use that, how to place those things in the advocacy plan. So that's where I'm currently stuck right now.
Okay. Pema, it'll be difficult for me to comment if I don't read your draft. Could you
Yeah.
maybe send me your draft by the end of this week, and then I'll get back to you with inputs?
Sure. So I'll just update the last advocacy plan in the same structure and I'll provide you that. Then I think we can work after that, right?
Yes. So you're talking about you'll be updating the advocacy plan that you submitted during application, right?
Yes.
You're talking about that, no? Yeah. All right. Yes. You do that, and then you can send it back to me.
Okay, sure. Thank
An
you.
updated copy. No problem.
Joy,
Yes,
I
I
also wanted to ask you something like I've not so far drafted any plan, but I wanted to do it on the impacts of climate change on Indigenous women, and most probably it could be on in Nepal itself. So from AIPP and FIMI, we are also planning to have um, one community of practice on climate justice. I just had a meeting with Susilaji yesterday in Nepal. So it will be with partners of FIMI. So could I perhaps link some of my plans? I mean, like extracting of some of the information from that event, and also kind of prepare a key outcome document from their experience on the impacts of climate change, which could be linked to COP28 this year. Or what do you think about it? I could share this plan at the end of the week, or maybe first next week, in the first half of the next week?
Mhm. Okay.
Or does it have to be? I just wanted to know if that kind of methodology will be okay, or
Mm.
yeah.
Okay. So, Richa, in the past, FIMI usually do not recommend this from the global
Mm-mm.
school, because it'll
Okay.
be kind of a poor funding, right, for one project. Uh, so when are you planning to implement this particular plan that you're talking about, the one that you'll be doing with EIPP and FIMI?
That's in April that we are going to have one event, but
Mm.
it will be on climate justice, and there will be some of the partners from FIMI and Indigenous women coming over to that event. So I just wanted to like from that event, extract some information that they've shared, their experiences, and perhaps make some outcome document,
Mm.
like key message from Indigenous women to COP28. Or yeah, I was just thinking this is not. I just
Okay.
wanted to ask you also if that kind of approach would be okay, or we have to do kind of like Dex review and all to get the information.
Okay. So what I understand what you're saying is you'll have a particular event in April. You'll be making an outcome document from that, and based on that, you will be formulating your advocacy plan for the global school.
Yeah, something like yeah. That could be one of the advocacy tool that can be used for the advocacy plan.
Okay. Yes, actually, that sounds better, but I'm just thinking in terms of logistics, because if you have this event
Mm-hmm.
in April, your advocacy plans
Oh,
are also due at the same time.
mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you will have the time to formulate. You will not have the time, in fact, to formulate the advocacy plan after that, because we're expecting your advocacy plan submission in about 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks
Okay.
from now. But
Mm-hmm.
Richa, I would recommend you already have an idea, right, from being in the field and from your
Mm-hmm.
experiences in various conferences. I
Yeah.
you can kind of formulate your advocacy plan in terms of maybe as a follow-up from the event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you
Yeah.
you
Okay.
can you can connect that with the event. Yes, but I don't know if we will not have the time to wait till the outcome document is out, because when your event is over, then you'll take some time to also formulate the outcome document with your team. I think it'll be
Mm,
too late for you to submit the advocacy plan for us then.
okay. Okay. So I'll think of something else then. Yeah. Thank
Actually, it's a
you.
good idea. You can think of a
Mhm.
follow-up.
I mean, I think that can be a part of the plan,
Mm, mm. Yes,
because
that can definitely be
advocacy
part
is,
of the plan.
yeah, this advocacy thing is to be continued, no, beyond global leadership school. So
Yes.
I will, one of the element would be that also, and rest I will prepare and send to you earliest the possible.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Maria just said that she saw the document
Mm-hmm.
that will help you to structure your advocacy plan.
Okay.
If you're still unable to find it, please let me know, and then I'll just download and share it with you directly on email.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Now, I think your proposal is good. Like your initial proposal is good. It's something that you can work with. So I want to see how you further develop it using the okay, sorry, I was reading something else. Yeah, so I want to see how you develop it further using the guideline that you are given,
Okay.
because that now you're going to break down this into who's going to be involved, what activities you're going to be doing, who are going to be your allies during this process. If you're talking about climate change, for for the Indigenous women in Naramam, then what tools in terms of the from what you've been learning, what are some of those things that you can use in your training for women, and things like that. So please check out the advocacy plan guide and start to develop your advocacy plan based on the guide,
Okay.
and then we can discuss again next week. Okay.
Ciao.
Yeah. Right. Irene, can you go next? Irene? Oh, okay, she's dropped off. So Maria, please go.
Okay. Okay, my advocacy plan topic is about women's and girls' rights. And I will major on Indigenous women's and girls' rights since they face different kind of violence. So it will focus on Indigenous women and girls based in Samburu. And my objective is to ensure that there is realization of Indigenous women's rights and girls' rights, also to ensure that there is inclusive and effective participation and representation of Indigenous women and girls in all public institutions and decision-making platforms. Expected outcome: educating them will make them empowered and become free from violence. Also, the Indigenous women and girls will understand how to use the legal process in case their rights are violated. And lastly, the role of Indigenous peoples, especially Indigenous women and girls, will be implemented since it has been ignored. So my goal is a community with empowered, knowledgeable Indigenous women and girls. Yeah, I will enhance on it. I'm through.
Okay, thank you, Maria. So again, what you need to do is you have to be support when you're both. I don't know if Irene is back. No. Okay. You have to be very specific when you're in your topic, so that whatever topic you choose, it can encompass all these other things that you want to talk about violence, the role of Indigenous women and girls in their communities and things like that. When you say the rights of Indigenous women and girls, it's very broad. And those rights can include anything. So you have to be specific about which rights you're referring to.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't want the topic to be so broad that nobody knows what you're talking about from the outset. So from your topic,
Mm.
you have to be specific. So please restructure what what your topic is at the top. Again, remember that we're always trying to relate our advocacy plans to the theme of the year of the permanent forum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, and
Yes.
you're free to decide what approach you want to take
Okay.
when you're doing your plan. So again, please restructure your topic.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when you use the guide that was provided, you'll be able to now break down further what your plan will look like.
Mm.
I'm hoping to see a draft from all of you actually before we meet next week. You can draft your plan, share it with me so that when we meet, there's time for feedback. It's going to be a feedback session for all of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have a few minutes left. We have about a minute left. Does anyone have a question?
Mm.
I don't think Irene has
For now.
joined. Okay. Yes, Maria.
No, I'm saying for now, I don't have. Maybe when I will have, I'll share with you.
All right. Helma, any question?
Yes, I've checked the Google Drive. I've not seen. Maybe you can share with me.
All right. You know, Maria, are you experiencing the same problem with Google Drive?
No, me, I can access it.
Okay. Yeah, you had a question?
Oh, I was saying about the advocacy plan. Are we submitting it first so that we can go to the field, or we are going to the field, then we come and submit?
Which field?
When we go to maybe to implement in.
No, you have to submit it first before you implement, because you have to submit it. It has to get approved. Your budget has to be approved.
Oh.
Yeah, that's why we're working on that now, so that you can refine it and have a final proposal by the end of the classes. And then after that you can implement. So you can't implement the plan before completing the proposal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Emma, I want to find out why you're not able to access the Google Drive. Are you able to see the other documents?
Yes, I've seen the one Maria read?
No. That is not the Google Drive we're referring to. I'm referring to the Google Drive that has the reading material. There's
Edma,
the Google.
Mine is
you can
updated
Google reading.
Yours is what?
March 2023.
Hmm.
And I've clicked, but mine goes up to 24th March. That's the reading material I have.
Yeah, but the advocacy plan was shared earlier on in the very
Mhm.
first sessions. So you need to go back to about February.
Okay.
Remember there was the link that I shared with you that I resent you, the one that you didn't have, you couldn't see before.
Mm-hmm.
That is that's the link you're looking at.
Okay, let me check.
We were talking about our advocacy plans, but now we're about to go back to the main room. Question is, are you able to see the document on the advocacy plan from the reading material link that you have?
No, I've seen it, but I will check.
Come again?
I've not seen it, but I will check again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to let us tell us briefly about your advocacy plan before we get sent back.
Previously I'd written on something else, but I thought of changing to doing graphic.
Your voice is cutting.
I've said, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, previously I'd done on something else when applying for this, but I thought of changing to environmental issues. I've not yet drafted my advocacy plan, but I will work on it this week.
Oh, so you want to change it from what you initially had in your...
Yeah.
Okay. So please check again if you have access to, or rather if you can see the guide for the advocacy plan, and then work on your advocacy plan, and then so that we can next, and then you send it to me and we can go through them next week. Okay. Is that okay, Irene?
Yeah.
Right. Any other questions? Any questions?
No, I don't have.
Okay. So on the WhatsApp group, I'll share with you possible times we can meet, possibly probably on Thursday next week again, but in the evening
Okay.
or in the afternoon. I'll share with you proposed times that we can all agree on.
Okay.
Yes.
On Thursday, so that it can be our days of review, not just for the advocacy plan, but just review of the sessions in general. But we'll be focusing more on the advocacy plans during those sessions, but we continue to be in touch via email and via WhatsApp.
Okay.
Right. So later today, I'll share with you possible times. And then you can let me know, and then I'll set up the call for next week.
Okay.
So Herma, when you
Yes.
look at the drive that has the reading materials,
Mm-hmm.
please check February 15th.
Mm-hmm.
Check the material on February 15th. It's the one that has the advocacy plan.
Okay.
Okay, so there you'll see the structure of the advocacy plan. There's about 15 steps, which it's not that much. When you start to work on it, it kind of flows. So please check on that and then let me know if you still can't see it.
I found it.
You found it?
Yes.
Okay. So again, so this is the link that will have all the reading materials. The other one was just for the statement.
Okay.
But this is the link that has the reading material. So this is what you'll be using. Or this is what you're going to be referring to when you're looking for your reading materials.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
Cody,
Yes.
when I'll be reading the statement, will you put it in PowerPoint or I will just read from my end?
No, you'll read from your end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm not sure if they're going to share it on screen,
Mm.
but yeah. But I think you should just read it on your end. It's going to be easier for you.
Yes, okay. Thank you.
Right.
Good evening. Welcome everyone again. Right now, we're going to start with the second part of our agenda for today. And we are going to welcome the political team from FEMI, which has great trajectory and a lot of experience, and they're going to listen to our statements so that we can also strengthen our documents through their comments. We also want them to feel completely comfortable making all of their comments and giving us recommendations to make all the statements better for each region. We know that there is a person who has been designated to read the documents for every region. So let's have those documents ready and to be completely ready to start reading the documents when we have to do so. So we're going to start with this second part. So according to what we have in our agenda, we're going to start with the statement from the Latin American region. I had the opportunity to work with them, so thank you so much for all of the comments, all of the observations, and everything that are going to be all of the comments that are going to be made for feedback for our work. So now we're going to give the floor to Juliana. She's from Guatemala. She was chosen by her teammates to read this statement. So Juliana, you can go ahead, and thank you for taking on this responsibility and for the work that you have done throughout all the time that we have been drafting this statement. So Juliana, please go ahead.
Juliana, can you hear us? Yes, can you hear me? Yes, we can. We can hear you now. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and then you can read your statement. Okay, well, good evening to everyone, and good morning to others. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to share our statement with you. This has been a really important process for learning and for building our proposals. For many of us, it's the first time that we have seen this kind of document. So can you imagine, there's so many needs in our communities, and we want to be able to reflect all of the needs in the statements, but we're trying to learn that we have to follow the topics of the various bodies that we are working with. And so it's been a learning process, and we are very grateful for Hortensia's support, which has been really important on our journey. This has been an important thing for us in our region. And so now we're going to present this proposal. I will begin. Perhaps you can help me There you go, to help me to share the document while I read it, yes. Sorry for interrupting you. Before you continue, sorry about the political team of FEMI. They're here with us now, and I haven't given them a chance to introduce themselves. So I want you to know who they are and who are the people who are going to be listening to the reading of your statement. So go ahead. Well, okay. Thank you very much, Orte. My name is Maria Manuela Sequeira. I'm from Nicaragua. And currently, I live in Texas with my family, and I'm a coordinator for the FEMI program. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us this evening. I also want to give the floor over to our other sister, whose name I do not recall how to say, but go ahead if you could introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Good morning from my side and good night very soon from other sides. My name is Rabia too, so you can just call me Rabia. I am actually based in Egypt, in Cairo, and I am the coordinator for political affairs and advocacy at FEMI. Thank you very much. I'm looking much forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much to the two members of the political team from FEMI. We also believe that it's an advantage for us, for you to hear our statements and to be able to strengthen the work that we're doing. So welcome and thank you very much for accompanying us. So now go ahead, Juliana, you have the floor. Okay, no problem. And thanks very much to all of you. Here is our statement. It says the following: Regional Declaration of Indigenous Women of Latin America. The International Forum of Indigenous Women, FEMI, facilitates communication, coordination, and strategic alliances between Indigenous women at the international level, and Latin America is one of the regions presenting our statement related to the topic of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues for 2023. The topic is Indigenous Peoples, Human Health, Planetary and Territory Health, and Climate Change, a right-based approach. In this sense, we prioritize the following recommendations. 1. Considering Recommendation 20.96, Investment and Collaboration on the Mental Health of Indigenous Peoples, Session number 20, 2021. The Permanent Forum recognizes the need to address the emergence of the mental health consequences of the pandemic. The consequences are being felt in all populations, but most acutely in populations that have been traditionally marginalized. The forum calls for investments and preparations for mental and behavioral health interventions that are culturally adapted. Traditional medicines and practices can play a key role in the health of Indigenous communities and individuals by encompassing a variety of dimensions, including the spiritual. The forum calls on the WHO, PAHO, member states of the UN, Indigenous peoples to work together to provide pathways for promoting mental health. Recommendation 3.89, Health and Indigenous Women, Session number 3, 2004. Reaffirming the recommendation on health, we demand the material guarantee that all relevant UN entities, especially the WHO, UNICEF, and UNFPA, as well as regional health organizations and governments, fully incorporate the principle that health is a fundamental human right in all health policies and programs, and to including treating rights, the right to culturally acceptable and appropriate services, and Indigenous women's productive rights. 3. Taking up once again Recommendation 20.96 12, Traditional Knowledge Against Climate Change, Session 2021. The global engagement of Indigenous peoples at the international level has led to some positive institutional developments, including the establishment of the Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples platform of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. The traditional knowledge of Indigenous peoples can play an important role in the fight against climate change. Member states and United Nations entities should assure that any activities related to the use of the traditional knowledge of Indigenous peoples respect people's own protocols and consent agreements for managing access to their traditional knowledge. Strengthening and ensuring the full participation of Indigenous peoples at all levels is also critical for the design and implementation of climate policies, plans, programs, and projects at the local, national, and global levels. 4. Recommendations 7.10. Policies and projects on climate change, the role of Indigenous women and youth. Equity, social justice, and sustainable development, and development with identity should remain the key principles underpinning the negotiations, policies, and programs on climate change. The human rights-based approach to development and the ecosystem approach should guide the design and implementation of local, national, regional, and global climate policies and projects. The crucial role of Indigenous women and Indigenous youth in developing mitigation and adaptation measures should also be ensured. 5. Recommendation 21.87. Indigenous peoples, land, water, territories, and resources, governance, and tenure security. Ensuring a human rights-based approach to Indigenous peoples' rights to land, water, territories, and resources, governance, and secure customary tenure is essential for the continued contribution and significant role in achieving the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Indigenous lands, waters, and territories need to be recognized directly and as a category separate from protected areas or other effective area-based conservation measures, including when recognizing the land rights of Indigenous women. And in this sense, indicators must be developed that reflect the rights of Indigenous peoples to facilitate monitoring and implementation. 6. All UN entities and member states are urged to adopt and comply with CEDAW General Recommendation 39 on the rights of Indigenous women and girls, especially as related to issues of discrimination, climate change, and integrated health, ensuring that laws and policies related to the environment, to climate change, and to the reduction of disaster risks reflect the damaging impact of these problems in Indigenous women and girls, and ensure their full and effective participation in decision-making in the approach to these topics. Thank you very much. Thank you, Juliana. Thank you for sharing the Declaration of Latin America. And we will doubtless have opinions and recommendations about this from the other participants as well as from the FEME political team. So now we are going to turn the floor over to our sisters from Africa so that they can share with us their declarations. So please, all of the participants, please make notes about any things you may have in common and what's there, what's missing, and any questions that you might have. So let's pay close attention to the various declarations. So welcome, sisters from Africa. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good evening to others. I'm Maria Letitoya from Kenya. I'll take you through our statement for Africa and North America. We had a fruitful discussion with the help of Cody, and I'll read it. Second session of the United Nations Permanent Forum, theme Indigenous Peoples, Human Health, Planetary and Territorial Health and Climate Change, a right-based approach. Thank you, Chair. The Indigenous Women's Global Leadership School on behalf of Africa and North America, representing several organizations that include African Indigenous Women's Organization, International Alliance of Indigenous and Tribal of the Tropical Forests, Naramam Women Group Organization, Abiba Community, and Changing Women Initiative. Thank you for this opportunity to address the forum. We acknowledge the work that has been done in advancing the rights of Indigenous women and would like to especially highlight and applaud the adoption of General Recommendation number 39 on the rights of Indigenous women and girls by CEDAW. We, however, would like to continue to highlight the issues that Indigenous women continue to experience in their communities that include drought, food insecurity, and water scarcity because of prolonged season without rain. In addition to this, women continue to lack access and ownership to land and other resources because of cultural beliefs and practices that dictate that women and girls cannot or should not own or have access to land and resources because these belong to men. Indigenous women depend on their natural environment for their livelihoods and cultural practices, and these are interrupted because of not only the adverse effects of climate change, but also the lack of access to land ownership and use and other resources that can help them to mitigate the effects of climate change. Acknowledging this and taking into considerations of the UN RIP, we recommend the following. Sorry, wait a minute, sorry for that. 1, for member states, UN agencies such as Food and Agriculture Organization and IFAD to ensure food security for Indigenous women and by extension, their communities. Number 2, to build stronger partnerships between, let me repeat number 1. Recommendation for member states, UN agencies such as Food and Agriculture Organization and IFAD to ensure food security for Indigenous women and by extension, their communities through recognition and support and revitalization of traditional food systems and training in climate smart agriculture. Number 2, to provide stronger partnerships between states, UN bodies, civil society organizations, and the private sector to increase direct funding to Indigenous peoples of organizations for climate change adaptation and mitigation projects for Indigenous communities. 3, for member states and other stakeholders to implement policies and enable Indigenous women to have access to and own land without bias or discrimination. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your statement. Now, we are going to give the floor to our sisters for the sisters from Asia and the Pacific to share their statement. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Welcome, and it is your turn. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I'll be reading this statement. Greetings to the chair and to everyone. We, the Indigenous Women of the global leadership, FEME, representing the Asia Pacific region, take this opportunity to bring to your attention details of the devastating impacts of climate change and biodiversity loss, as well as other issues experienced by communities of Indigenous peoples in the Asia Pacific region. Indigenous peoples in the Philippines were severely affected by various natural disasters. The Taduray and Lambangian people of Maguindanao, as well as Tabagnua, Palawan, and Batak people, Palawan reported the destruction brought by typhoons Nalgay and Rai, respectively, towards the end of 2022. Similarly, the Dibabawon and Mansaka people, Davao de Oro, experienced a series of earthquakes. The Pidlisan people of Mountain Province in northern Philippines could not start their community small-scale mining initiative as the DENR has yet to approve their permit. This is worsened by the questionable agenda of Planet Gold, a private company who persistently wants to be included in the project without FPIC application. Alongside these, Indigenous peoples in the recently created BARMM are still clamoring for the development of an Indigenous Peoples Code in line with the IPRA. While the NCIP is the government agency tasked with safeguarding and implementing the rights of Indigenous peoples in the Philippines, the need to amplify and reiterate its duty is called for, not only in the BARM area, but also all over the country. In Northeast India, the ever-increasing clamor for globalization and development is threatening the need to preserve the indigenous culture of the Nagas and Tripuri people there. While numerous investors are entering the area, the possibility of indigenous peoples losing their culture and identity is a serious threat. Likewise, the necessary access to basic government services related to health and formal education, as well as the arrival of external religions, are impacting Indigenous peoples' traditional knowledge and practices, which then also cause unwanted conflicts in the area. In Indonesia, the $3 billion worth Mandalika Urban Development and Tourism Project, implemented by the ITDC and funded by the IIB, is wrought with reports of human rights violations, including coercion by state forces of Indigenous peoples to cede their lands. Oil palm plantations in Indonesia are still negatively impacting the lives of Indigenous peoples there as well. 2 additional palm oil companies exited the high carbon stock approach, a mechanism dedicated to assisting companies attain zero deforestation targets. In Guam, the US military is building a massive firing range complex over the NGLA, a critical resource that provides the island community with 85% of its fresh drinking water. Up to 6.7 million lead bullets will be fired over the aquifer every year, threatening the community's primary water source, as well as the surrounding coastline. Indigenous Maji communities from Ramachap and Sinduli districts of Nepal have demanded the cancellation of Sankoshi 2 hydropower project as their right to free, prior, and informed consent have been violated. The project stands in the way of the creation of an autonomous Maji protected region. The project will reportedly cause inundation up to at least 53 kilometers from the dam in an area of 4,500 hectares, submerge majority of settlements along the banks of Sankoshi and Tamakoshi rivers in the 2 districts, and displace around 6,000 households and impact 400,000 people. Such displacement and impact will directly affect the traditional livelihood of fishing and boats of the Maji community, and also their culture and identity will be in crisis, as it is their ancestral land and their life is related to water. So while much effort has gone into prioritizing Indigenous women participation in various decision-making spheres, including the adoption of the SIDA and General Recommendation number 39, the rampant occurrence of early marriage, maternal mortality, assault and kidnapping of women and girls, including Indigenous women, is still of major concern. To address these numerous risks and vulnerabilities of Indigenous peoples to the impacts of climate change, as well as increase their resilience and truly acknowledge their rights, I call on the Permanent Forum to recommend the following. 1, the need to put pressure on Indigenous-led initiatives with the astute practice of FPIC at all times. 2, for the Philippine government to provide ample support to the creation and genuine implementation of an IP code in the BARM that would reflect the provisions of the IPRA or RA 8371 and the UN DRIP. For the Indonesian government to approve the draft Indigenous Peoples Law to enable the effective implementation of the UN DRIP. For the government of India to recognize the presence of Indigenous peoples within its borders and provide necessary actions to protect and promote their unique identities, adhering to the provisions of the UN DRIP and the ILO Convention number 107. 5, for the United States government to address the risks and vulnerabilities of Indigenous peoples, specifically in Guam, to the impacts of resource loss as a result of militarization, as is highlighted in the construction of a massive firing range over the NGLA, as well as ensure Guamanian Indigenous peoples continued access to safe drinking water and sanitation. 6, a re-emphasis on the call to protect human rights defenders and assertion of Indigenous peoples' claim to their ancestral lands, territories, and resources. And finally, 7, to urge states to implement fully and effectively the SADA General Recommendation number 39, which should then strengthen the call to abolish all kinds of abuse and discrimination committed against Indigenous women and girls, as well as ensure their meaningful inclusion in the different decision-making processes and spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Siobhan. We have heard the 3 recommendations, and today we thank the work and the time, and we are now going to know the reactions from all of us and the comments and opinions, and we can perhaps identify with comments from our sisters from other regions, so we can see what points, what issues are common in the 3 regions. And perhaps there's some items that you find are key, but have not been stated in any of the statements. So we're now going to enter this space of conversation. So you can raise your hand or make your comment. So we're going to have about 15 minutes.
Who would like to make a comment related to the statements that you just heard?
Yes, I have been listening with great interest, and
If we do a general document I think one of the main issues that came up from the 3 regions, one of the main issues was the issue of autonomy in our lands and territories. So the free, prior, and informed consent is a huge thing that is so important that we're feeling in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. And so many projects are coming in on our territories. And so I think we could maybe prioritize that issue a lot and perhaps put some examples on it. I think in Asia, they really used a lot of good examples of where the companies are coming in. And I think we should have an example from every region. So that we can make this situation more visible in a stronger way. Because in every place where we are, our national states are doing very similar things. So I think in Latin America, in our statement, we should have included a few more things. Perhaps how with CEDAW, we might have some examples for how the states could actually incorporate these recommendations in their national legislation. But I think that all the statements have a lot of points in common. I don't know if it would be worth it to talk about access to justice, if that might fit in as well within this overarching theme, but that's another important issue that affects all of the regions because of violence, and all kinds of violence is increasing along with femicides of Indigenous women in particular. Thank you, Elizabeth. After having heard our declarations once again, I think we start to realize where we might need to strengthen some of them. And we can see some of the strengths and weaknesses. And this is what this space is for, to look at those. So let's continue the conversation. Who else has another opinion or something to say about the statements that we've heard? If there's no one else that wants to make a comment right now, we can continue with our agenda. And we can turn the floor over to our sisters from the political committee of FEME. And their experience internationally is something that we can really take advantage of here, because they have been working for a number of years in the international arena. So we want to hear their ideas about the statements that they've heard today. So welcome. And Nela, we'll go ahead and turn the floor over to you first for your recommendations. Okay, thank you very much, Orte, and thank you to all of you. And first of all, congratulations for all of the efforts that you have made to prepare your regional statements, which are strong. And they really show the reality of each one of the regions. Can you hear me? Can you not hear me? No, we do hear you. I can hear you very well, at least. Okay. Well, we did the exercise of reading the declarations ahead of time. And so we'd like to share with all of you some of the things that we were able to put down about the observations that we made. Can you see my screen? Not yet, but I'm sure it's coming up.
Can you see? Can you see it now? There's
Not yet.
only a white screen, blank screen. Can somebody help me share the screen while
Let
Ravi
me try.
moves
Let
on?
me try sharing from my side. Yeah, let's see. Can you see now? Okay. Hey Nella, are you done? Hey, thank you everyone. Congratulations again for really the work that you've put in place to come up with these wonderful statements. They are very rich and they have a lot of issues actually faced by Indigenous women around the globe. So I and Nela, we had the opportunity to look at the 3 regional statements, and so we identified some common grounds which we saw running across all the 3 statements. The first one is that the 3 statements are actually in line with the theme of the year, which is climate change. As we have seen throughout the statements, they are mentioning climate change and it's the impact on the environment generally, as well as the specific impact it has on women and girls. And there have been issues of lack of access and control over natural resources, especially land and land tenure issues. We have seen that across the different statements as well. So this issue of land entails, it is still a concern for our Indigenous communities, which we really need to stress upon during our international advocacy efforts. We also saw that in the different statements, even though they highlighted issues regarding climate change, the different statements also highlighted the importance of, going beyond political participation of women only and addressing other structural vulnerabilities that are still actually affecting the advancement of Indigenous people in our community. So that is a good point also. While we focus on climate change and political participation, it's good to also still, come out or bring back the other vulnerabilities that needs to also be taken into consideration. And also when we looked at the different statements, we saw that the issue of protection of our ancestral lands and Indigenous territories was an issue. We saw the examples given by Asia and Latin America. So this is a key issue that we thought is a common ground between the 3 statements. And the issue of adoption of the General Recommendation 39 of the CEDAW, it was something that frequently was discussed about, which is very important because this is a milestone in the advocacy agenda for Indigenous people. So it is good to look at the General Recommendation 39, especially with regards to environmental issues and climate change, to see what are the entry points where Indigenous people can start from to be able to push their advocacy efforts ahead. And also we saw across the statements the issue of health and access to health services is very important also in line with our traditional knowledge, traditional medicine, and so on and so forth. So these are important issues which are also linked at the same time to climate change that needs to be addressed. And in the case of Black and Africa, they both mentioned the lack of access and ownership of land and other resources due to cultural beliefs and practices, that dictate the place of a woman and a girl is in the kitchen rather than managing communal resources. So from our perspective, we know this is not exhaustive, but these are kind of some very key highlights that we could see run out through the different statements. So we think maybe when compiling the general statements, these issues are very key and need just to be harmonized. But however, the ideas expressed in the different statements are very extensive and are very comprehensive. So it will just be an issue of taking each idea and harmonizing it to reflect like a general statement on behalf of all the indigenous people. So also, there were some key particularities about these statements because the different regions have different issues and, so they need to address specifically. So I will give the floor to my colleague Nella to share with you some of those key particularities that we highlighted from the different statements. Nella, over to you.
Thank you, Rabi. And indeed, as Rabi says, when sisters, you are presenting this collective political position, it is important to harmonize all those common points. But we've also identified particular issues to each region that they could be strategic and that you could consider including. So in the case of Asia and Pacific, something that really got our attention is the strength and the need to include everything related to mining on indigenous territories and the military presence, as well as all of those other foreign direct investment and development projects that are impacting negatively our groups, indigenous groups and cultures that are also impacting ancestral knowledge. That was specifically highlighted in the group from Asia and the Pacific, and we didn't see those in the other groups. But it would be very important to keep those issues in mind when we present our collective statement. Another point that Asia and the Pacific mentioned was the influence of foreign religions on the cultures of indigenous peoples. They are not part of the indigenous traditions and they're having an impact on the indigenous communities. That was a very interesting element, particular to the statement from Asia, but we need to keep it in mind once the committee consolidates all the important points. Maybe this is something that could be included, even though we haven't seen it present right now in the other groups. In the case of Africa and North America, they mentioned, although it was not mentioned in the other groups, they did make a reference to food insecurity. And we also believe that this topic should be considered when we present your political position. Something that caught our attention as well is that Africa and North America included as one of the key actors in their specific recommendations, they included the private sector as a stakeholder. That was different also in their statement in comparison to the other statements. So if you would like, you can consider adding the private sector and how we want to include that in terms of what recommendation we make in the collective statement. In the case of Latin America, we thought it was also a positive and a plus that our sisters included in the recommendations things related to mental health and the importance of ancestral healing as part of the practices to eradicate multiple forms of discrimination and violence, but also for climate change mitigation. Our sisters from Latin America also mentioned something very specific, and that was the role of Indigenous youth and the adaptation and the design of policies focused on adaptation and mitigation of climate change. So these are points that were very particular to each region, and we believe that they could enrich the collective political position when you present a collective statement.
Yes, thank you, Nela. I think you can just go ahead and discuss. So we had common grounds and we had particularities. So at the end of the day, we decided to propose some few recommendations on how to proceed as of now in, harmonizing the three statements into one. So I think, Nela, you can just go ahead and present the recommendations to the group.
Before proceeding with the recommendations, I don't know whether we should pause here for about 5 minutes to see if our colleagues here agree with these similarities or differences. Hortensia, what do you think? I think that this is a very enriching moment. So indeed, we would like to hear your recommendations instead. So please proceed. Yes, please proceed so that we can take advantage of the time. As far as recommendations, we took many good practices because we, as we always say, learn a lot from each other. And from these three regional statements, we identified very positive aspects. One of the suggestions when you're drafting the political collective position, obviously, you would like to do that. You want to do that as a consolidated statement. So, for example, Latin America was talking about the International Forum of Indigenous Women. So our recommendation would be to please go back to the experience by the recommendations from Africa and also North America and Asia Pacific, because they start saying, we participate, we are participants of the Global Leadership School. So whatever you write needs to start with that, addressing that you are saying that you are addressing the forum on behalf of participants of the Global Leadership School, and that you're representing Indigenous leaders from all the regions. Another recommendation that we saw and that we found very interesting in what Latin America wrote, and that is how they found or they looked to see what recommendations were already adopted by the Permanent Forum previously. That is what I understood when I read the specific recommendations that alluded to the year and to the text of that specific recommendation. So when you're writing your political position, a recommendation or political statement, a recommendation is to always think on the plus. What's new? Because there's over 150 recommendations for Indigenous women. So instead of mentioning too many recommendations, the best is to have only 2 or 3 maximum, but strong and realistic, and to find what's plus. because our sisters already did this mapping on what recommendations are important for these topics. So the important thing is to reflect on what are we going to demand again, and what do we want to do, for when, how. So be very specific and very concrete with our recommendations, thinking about what's new, who, when, and why, and what for. I think that is going to help you a lot, so that you're not just repeating what's being said, but with strength, to bring something new that we want to advocate for and renew as a collective. I can also continue. So in the case of Asia, so as Elizabeth was saying, in terms of the reference to what's happening in the community, we agree with her, with Elizabeth, that it would be powerful to have an example by region, because since it is a collective statement, we cannot be specific to countries, but perhaps by region, like Asia could perhaps identify one example, Latin America identify one example, and just have an example from each region and link them in the text. So connect them, weave them together. So that is another recommendation, but we have to be very brief, because the time that we're allowed to read the statement is only 3 minutes. And that takes me to another recommendation that is key. And that is, when I was listening to you, on average, it took 5 to 7 minutes to read the statements. So Africa, I think our colleagues from, our sisters from Africa and North America, I think they were together. It should be 1 page. It doesn't have to be that extensive. It needs to be concise. Another recommendation.
Ella, do you have issues seeing the screen?
Another issue is abbreviations. When we present a political statement, we cannot we cannot think that everybody knows what abbreviations mean. You know, UNDRIP, FIPC. We do not know for sure that everybody understands those abbreviations. So we need to name all of them. We need to say, we're going to say PNUD, but the UN Program for Development. So when we make a political statement, we need to try to be careful not to use any abbreviations. We need to name the complete entity name, program name, international instruments. We're going to make a reference to the CETA, we need to actually spell it out and say what it is, which is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, for example. And something that Rabia and I noticed when we read the statements, except for Latin America, which was very explicit, focusing on youth, this intergenerational focus on youth, that was interesting. But we didn't see on any of the 3 statements focus on Indigenous women with disabilities. And Rabia and I, when we were discussing the statements, we thought that perhaps you should consider that element as part of your recommendations. And of course, the issue of time we mentioned before. They're very long, so in reality, you can only work with perhaps one page with the lines divided at 1.5, and to practice reading. Because once you're at the plenary at the UN, if you go over the 3 minutes, they will simply turn your mic off. And that way you would have wasted, you would have lost the opportunity to complete your whole statement. So we need to be very smart. So have a very brief background introduction, and then have very concrete, specific recommendations. That's where the strength is, and that's where the need is when you're advocating in these spaces. So these are the aspects that we identified. Thank you, Nela. There's no doubt that having the experience of having been in these spaces enriches the exercise that we are doing here today. There are still some other recommendations, Nela, right? Yes, but I would really like to hear from the participants whether they have any questions on how to do this. Rabi and I are available to you for anything you may need. But yes, those were our recommendations, a summary of our recommendations. Thank you so much. So let's now take advantage of the next few minutes to ask questions or make specific comments. We have a few minutes. Hello again, it's me, says Elizabeth. I think that definitely your experience is so obvious, and we thank you so much for your help. Just listening to you, we can see the knowledge that you have about the space and the regions. I don't know whether it would be worth it to, we'll see what my sisters say, but having the opportunity of working with this political committee, if we could perhaps, especially for those of us who don't have the long experience, whether it would be possible to summarize everything that we have already written down. So I don't know whether you can help us creating some sort of outline that can help us from the beginning to get going, and especially even with what the introduction would be, some key words that we can use that are used because they're strong, because they're powerful to transmit the message. So perhaps you would be able to help us with that kind of outline, with some phrases, with some language, and we can then use it to build that consolidated statement with all of the information we've presented and all of your recommendations, but something that can then be powerful. So I think that this could help us as students, not only for this exercise, but other exercises where we would have to draft other recommendations, such as in our own countries, where we also make recommendations and work in advocacy. So it would be very helpful for this writing, this draft, and future drafts that we may have to work on. Yes, of course, we can do that. But we can also tell you that there's nothing written on stone. So of course, if we can share like an outline that we would use as a basis and share, at the same time, we need to say and share that it is not a fixed outline. It would be an open outline that you can use to build your own. And I believe that you already have that outline, because we can see that your introduction already follows that kind of outline, and all three statements follow a very important, a good presentation, a good outline. The important thing now is to consolidate the meat, let's say, the most important topics, so that everything that's important is there in a consolidated, effective way. So that would be my recommendation. But Elizabeth, I believe that you already have a clear outline, actually, based on what I've read. I believe you already have that. However, we can share with you an example if you would like that as a reference. But again, it's not a straightening jacket for you. Thank you so much for your comments and recommendations. Indeed, this is to improve the work, to improve the statements, and to be more realistic with our communities, and connecting it with the global work, or the work at the global level. If there are no other comments or questions or information from Joy, for example, or any of our colleagues, any other comments? We want to, for sure, we want to thank for the time, to thank our political team for the time that they've taken to read all of the statements, and for their experience, and for sharing all of their knowledge. So thank you so much for that. What we all want is to improve. Thank you so much. And with this, we are going to conclude.
Okay, may I come in, please? Sister Nella and Ravi, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. I know that we have to close soon, but I would just like to request if you just have 5 more minutes with us. Maybe we can just wait for a few more questions if you have the time.
Yeah.
So maybe we can just open up a few more minutes just for anyone who has any immediate questions for our team, for our guests. If no one has a question, then I have one question, Sister Nella. So you are aware that we will be having a drafting committee for the global school statement, right? So the drafting committee will be working on this statement, and could we also then send back the final consolidated statement to you for final inputs before we submit it to FIMI for reading it at the UN Permanent Forum?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I think that will be great, and we are going to share. I think Joy can share with them the small PowerPoint and the common ideas and the particularities to take into account, and you can harmonize the 3 statements. And sure, you can send back to us, and we will have a look again, and then before we finalize. So there is no problem. Actually, we will be more than happy to review again.
Okay. Great. Thank you, sisters. Over to you, Sister Orte. Yes. Yes, we can share with them.
Thank you very much. And once again, we will hope to ask for your help at another time once we have a single declaration that will be a statement from the whole international school. So we will begin to finalize our statements, and perhaps we can get it read through some of our allies who will be there in the permanent forum. Once again, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us and your recommendations with us. I think it will help the committee a lot in the putting together of our single international declaration. Thank you to all of you. Thanks to all of the participants as well. Thank you to the interpreters and the whole FEME team that make these virtual sessions possible. Good night to everyone. It's time to sleep over in our part of the year, our part of the world. Some of you have a few more hours left in the day, and others are just starting the day, and I hope it's a good one for you. It's been great to share this time with you. Have a good rest. And please continue working on your advocacy plans as well. Good night and good day. Bye-bye.